So we start the chapter. Around the world in 80 days. 34th one. In which Phileas Fogg at last reaches London. So it's an extract from that book, okay? So the first starting and all they have, that's why we have already covered it in the synopsis and the plot and theme and all that. Okay, so let's see what happens when they reach London. Now Phileas Fogg was in prison. He had been shut up in the custom house and he was to be transferred to London the next day. Passepartout, when he saw his master arrested, would have fallen upon Fix. So Fix is the detective, remember? Had he not been held back by some policemen. So Passepartout was also, some policemen caught him also. So he was not able to help out his master. Now Auda was thunderstruck, shocked at the suddenness of an event which she could not understand. She was wondering what is happening. So Passepartout explained to her how it was that the honest and courageous Fogg was arrested as a robber. There was a bank robbery, they were reading the newspaper. So the police doubted Fogg. So they were after him. So this Fix was a detective who was following him. Uska पीछा कर रहा था. So where all the places that Fogg visited, even the detective also visited. The young woman's heart revolted against so heinous a charge, and when she saw that she could attempt to do nothing to save her protector, she wept bitterly. So she was feeling sad that she can't do anything for him. As for Fix, he had arrested Mr. Fogg because it was his duty, whether Mr. Fogg was guilty or not, because that was his work. He had the arrest warrant and then he had to arrest. The thought then struck Passepartout that he was the cause of this new misfortune. So Passepartout felt that, it's because of him that this happened. Had he not concealed Fix's errand from his master? When Fix revealed his true character and purpose, why had he not told Mr. Fogg? So Passepartout knew that Fix was a detective and he was following this person, his master. But still, this attendant did not tell his master. If the latter had been warned, means latter here becomes Mr. Fogg. Okay, अगर उनको बता देता, तो maybe he would no doubt have given Fix proof of his innocence and satisfied him of his mistake. At least Fix would not have continued his journey at the expense and on the heels of his master, only to arrest him the moment he set foot. So he's saying, he should have told Mr. Fogg. So Fogg would have given all the proof. So Fix wouldn't, chase them. On English soil. Passepartout wept till he was blind and felt like blowing his brains out. Means he went on crying. He was feeling very bad. Auda and he had remained despite the cold under the portico of the custom house. Neither wished to leave the place. Both were anxious to see Mr. Fogg again. So Fogg को arrest करके custom house में रखा है. So Auda and that person Passepartout are waiting out for him. That gentleman was really ruined, and that at the moment when he was about to attain his end. Means they had already reached London and 79 days were over, So it was the 80th day. And then this arrest was fatal. Having arrived at Liverpool at 20 minutes before 12 on the 21st of December, he had till a quarter before 9 that evening to reach the Reform Club, that is 9 hours and a quarter. The journey from Liverpool to London was 6 hours. So now they are at this place and they have to reach London and they're 6 hours away. And this was a time when they would reach London and then the bet would be, then he would win the bet and he would get his £20,000. But before that only he was arrested and put in the jail, and every minute is so important for them. If anyone at this moment had entered the custom house, he would have found Mr. Fogg seated, motionless, calm, and without apparent anger upon a wooden bench. So Mr. Fogg was sitting motionless, means without moving, calm. He was not, it is true, resigned, but this last blow failed to force him into an outward betrayal of any emotion. Means he was not showing any emotion, just sitting calm there. Was he being devoured by one of those secret rages, all the more terrible because contained, and which only burst forth with an irresistible force at the last moment? Someone who's very calm and quiet and controlling all the angry emotions, and then they will burst. So, was he doing that? No one could tell. सब नेगेटिव इमोशंस, एंगर को अंदर दबा के रखते हैं, फिर बाद में एक्सप्लोड हो जाता है. सो वी कुडंट नो कि वो ऐसे क्यों कर रहे थे, मिस्टर फॉग इतना चुपचाप क्यों बैठे थे. देयर ही सैट कामली वेटिंग फॉर व्हाट, मीन्स क्यों रुका था, दे डोंट नो. डिड ही स्टिल चेरिश होप, मीन्स वॉज ही स्टिल होपिंग दैट ही वुड बी free? Did he still believe, now that the door of this prison was closed upon him, that he would succeed? So these are all questions coming to the reader's mind. Like as we read, we feel, oh, will he be relieved? Will he be released from there? Can he reach London on time? Will he win the bet? So these questions come to us. However, that may have been, Mr. Fogg carefully put his watch upon the table and observed its advancing hands. Not a word escaped his lips, but his look was singularly set and stern. The situation in any event was a terrible one, and might be thus stated. If Phileas Fogg was honest, he was ruined, and if he was a knave, he was caught. Means both ways he would be trapped, because even if he was honest, everything, but now he had already lost the bet. Means if he doesn't reach on time, so anyway it was going to be negative there also. And if he was a knave, means then he would be caught. Like if he is responsible for doing what he has done, what he has not done basically. He has not done it, but still he has been caught. Now did escape occur to him? I mean, did he think of running away from there? Did he examine to see if there was any practicable outlet from his prison? Did he think of escaping from it? Possibly. For once, he walked slowly around the room. But the door was locked and the window heavily barred with iron rods. I mean, there was no way to run away from that place. He sat down again and drew his journal from his pocket. On the line where these words were written, 21st December, Saturday, Liverpool, he added, 80th day, 11:40 a.m. and waited. The custom, this is the time when he's supposed to reach that place, okay? This is like it was written 21st December, Saturday, Liverpool. So then he said, oh, it's already 80th day and it is 11:40 now. And he waited. Now the custom house clock struck 1. Mr. Fogg observed that his watch was 2 hours too fast. 2 hours. Admitting that he was at this moment taking an express train, he could reach London and the Reform Club by a quarter before 9 p.m. His forehead slightly wrinkled. At 30 minutes past 2, he heard a singular noise outside. Then a hasty opening of doors. Passepartout's voice was audible, means he could hear it, and immediately after that, of Fix. Phileas Fogg's eyes brightened for an instant because he was happy that I think they are going to leave him now. The door swung open and he saw Passepartout, Aouda and Fix, who hurried towards him. Fix was out of breath and his hair was in disorder. He could not speak. "Sir," he stammered. "Sir, forgive me, most unfortunate resemblance. Robber arrested 3 days ago, you are free." So, he's saying the robber also looked like Fogg, and that is why Fogg was arrested. He was, it's an unfortunate resemblance. Resemblance means सेम दिख रहे थे दोनों, रॉबर और वो, इसलिए इनको इसका पीछा कर रहा था. Okay, and now he's free. So Phileas Fogg was free. He walked to the detective, looked at him steadily in the face, and with the only rapid motion he had ever made in his life, or which he ever would make, drew back his arms and with the precision of a machine knocked Fix down. So he just gave one to that Fix for wrongly, catching him and trapping him there. "Well hit," cried Passepartout. "Parbleu, that's what you might call a good application of English fists." Fist is, mutti, when you close your hand. Fix, who found himself on the floor, did not utter a word. But he had only received his desserts, sweet dish jaise. Mr. Fogg, Aouda and Passepartout left the custom house without delay, got into a cab and in a few minutes descended at the station. उनको बहुत जल्दी थी ना पहुंचने की, so they didn't want to waste any minute. Phileas Fogg asked if there was an express train about to leave for London. It was 40 minutes past 2. The express train had left 35 minutes before. Phileas Fogg then ordered a special train. वो जो ट्रेन एक थी वो छूट गई थी, 35 मिनट्स पहले निकल गया था वो. सो इसे कोई देन एक स्पेशल ट्रेन मिल सकता है. सो देन यू हैव टू पे फॉर इट. ओके, देयर वर several rapid locomotives on hand, but the railway arrangements did not permit the special train to leave until 3 o'clock. So the railways ने बोला कि 3 बजे के पहले तो नहीं निकल सकते. Okay, special train is there, but the permission is only to leave after 3. At that hour, Phileas Fogg, having stimulated the engineer by the offer of a generous reward, at last set out towards London with Aouda and his faithful servant. So, वो जो ट्रेन का जो इंजीनियर था उसको एक ऑफर दिया. Generous reward means generous is बिना सोचे, like you can give much more than what is required. And then they 3 set out. So Phileas Fogg, Aouda and the faithful servant, Passepartout. Okay. It was necessary to make the journey in 5 hours. अभी उनके पास इतना ही था पहुंचने के लिए, 5 hours and a half. And this would have been easy on a clear road. But there were forced delays, and when Mr. Fogg stepped from the train at the terminus, all the clocks in London were striking 10 minutes before 9. So it was already 8:50 p.m. Having made the tour of the world, he was behind hand 5 minutes. He had lost the wager. So he was supposed to reach at 9, means he was already means pura, the whole world he went and came back, but just for that 5-10 minutes he was going to miss that bet, and he had lost. So he accepted it that he's lost it. The 35th chapter begins, in which Phileas Fogg does not have to repeat his orders to Passepartout twice. Now, the dwellers in Savile Row would have been surprised the next day if they had been told that Phileas Fogg had returned home. His doors and windows were still closed. No appearance of change was visible. After leaving the station, Mr. Fogg gave Passepartout instructions to purchase some provisions and quietly went to his domicile. He bore his misfortune with his habitual tranquility. Tranquility is being very quiet and calm. Okay, ruined means he knew that he has lost the bet, he's lost everything. And by the blundering of the detective, means because of this detective, he was delaying every step. You know, he was after him, chasing him, and so he had missed the train. After having steadily traversed that long journey, overcome 100 obstacles, braved many dangers, and still found time to do some good on his way, to fail near the goal by a sudden event which he could not have foreseen and against which he was unarmed, it was terrible. Means after doing so many things, you travel all over the world, you have to face so many obstacles. And if you read the book, you will come to know that some places he had to even travel by, like, elephant, horse, so many like different modes of transport. And in the end, he was not able to win the bet. So that was terrible. But a few pounds were left of the large sum he had carried with him. There only remained of his fortune the 20,000 pounds. So some little money was there with him. When he had left, he had taken some cash with him. So little money was left. Plus the 20,000 pounds which he would have got if he had won the bet. Deposited at Barings, and this amount he owed to his friends of the Reform Club. Means he would have to give this 20,000 pounds to them because he had lost the bet. Otherwise he would get from them, correct? So 20,000 pounds he had deposited at this place, which he would get it, like it was like a security, maybe he must have kept somewhere. I mean, they had kept the money there. So either he gets it or the club will take it back. So great had been the expense of his tour that even had he won, it would not have enriched him because he had spent a lot of money traveling. And it is probable that he had not sought to enrich himself, being a man who rather laid wagers for honour's sake than for the stake proposed. Means it was more like when they told that you will not be able to do something, you will not be able to travel the whole world in 80 days. For him, it was more about that honor, that somebody was challenging him. So he accepted the challenge. It was not for money, but mainly for his honor, that I will do it. Okay. But this wager totally ruined him. Mr. Fogg's course, however, was fully decided upon. He knew what remained for him to do. A room in the house in Savile Row was set apart for Rhoda, who was overwhelmed with grief at her protector's misfortune. So she was also overwhelmed with grief, means sad. From the words which Mr. Fogg dropped, she saw that he was meditating some serious project. He was planning something. Knowing that Englishmen governed by a fixed idea sometimes resort to the desperate expedient of suicide, so she was scared that normally this Englishmen, they can, if they are totally depressed, they can commit suicide. So Passepartout kept a narrow watch upon his master, though he carefully concealed the appearance of so doing. So he kept it to himself. He did not tell anybody. He had found a bill from the gas company. First of all, the worthy fellow had gone up to his room and had extinguished the gas burner, which had been burning for 80 days. He had found in the letter box a bill from the gas company, and he thought it more than time to put a stop to this expense, which he had been doomed to bear. The night passed. Mr. Fogg went to bed, but did he sleep? No. Na? Aouda did not once close her eyes. Passepartout watched all night like a faithful dog at his master's door. So तीनों को भी नींद नहीं आ रही है. Okay? Mr. Fogg called him in the morning and told him to get Aouda's breakfast and a cup of tea and a chop for himself. He desired Aouda to excuse him from breakfast and dinner, as his time would be absorbed all day in putting his affairs to right. In the evening, he would ask permission to have a few moments' conversation with the young lady. Passepartout, having received his orders, had nothing to do but obey him. He looked at his imperturbable means, one who never gets disturbed. Perturb is to disturb, okay, master, and could scarcely bring his mind to leave him. His heart was full, and his conscience tortured by remorse, for he accused himself more bitterly than ever of being the cause of the irretrievable disaster. So this Passepartout was his assistant, servant, very faithful person. So he was feeling very guilty. Yes, if he had warned Mr. Fogg and had betrayed Fix's projects to him, his master would certainly not have given the detective passage to Liverpool, and then... So Passepartout could hold it no longer. My master, Mr. Fogg, he cried. Why do you not curse me? It was my fault. I blame no one, returned Phileas Fogg with perfect calmness. Go. Passepartout left the room and went to find Aouda, to whom he delivered his master's message. Madam, he added, I can do nothing myself, nothing. I have no influence over my master, but you, perhaps. What influence could I have? Replied Aouda. So Passepartout jaake Aouda ko he's saying that why don't you go and try? I'm not able to convince him. What influence could I have? Mr. Fogg is influenced by no one. Has he ever understood that my gratitude to him is overflowing? Has he ever read my heart? My friend, he must not be left alone an instant. You say he is going to speak with me this evening? So Mr. Fogg had told Passepartout that by evening he is going to talk to this female, okay, this lady. Yes, ma'am, probably to arrange for your protection and comfort in England. We shall see, replied Aouda, becoming suddenly pensive. Throughout this day, so they thought it is Sunday, okay? And that was the day when they were supposed to go. But they didn't realize that it was actually Saturday. I told you about the international dateline. Throughout this day, means Sunday, the house in Savile Row was as if uninhabited, means nobody was staying there. And Phileas Fogg, for the first time since he had lived in that house, did not set out for his club when Westminster clock struck 11:30. Every day he would go, but that day he did not go because he had lost the bet. He didn't want to show his face. Why should he present himself at the Reform? His friends no longer expected him there. As Phileas Fogg had not appeared in the saloon on the evening before Saturday, the 21st of December at 9:15, he had lost his wager. It was not even necessary that he should go to his bankers for the £20,000. For his antagonist already had his cheque in their hands, and they had only to fill it out and send it to Barings to have the amount transferred to their credit. So 11:30, 11:30 he was supposed to go there. Okay. And he thinks it is Sunday, but actually it is Saturday as promised. Now Mr. Fogg therefore had no reason for going out, and so he remained at home. He shut himself up in his room and busied himself putting his affairs in order. Passepartout continually ascended and descended the stairs. The hours were long for him. He listened at his master's door and looked through the keyhole, as if he had a perfect right so to do, and as if he feared that something terrible might happen at any moment. Sometimes he thought of Fix, but no longer in anger. I mean, now he was not angry. Fix, like all the world, had been mistaken in Phileas Fogg and had only done his duty in tracking and arresting him. While he, Passepartout, this thought haunted him, and he never ceased cursing his miserable folly. So this person was going on cursing himself only. Okay. Finding himself too wretched to remain alone, he knocked at Auda's door, went into a room and seated himself without speaking in a corner and looked ruefully at the young woman. Auda was still pensive, means sad. About 7:30 in the evening. Mr. Fogg said to know if Auda would receive him, and in a few moments he found himself alone with her. Phileas Fogg took a chair and sat down near the fireplace opposite Auda. No emotion was visible on his face. Fogg returned was exactly the Fogg who had gone away. There was the same calm and the same impassibility. He sat several minutes without speaking. Then, bending his eyes on Auda, "Madam," said he, "will you pardon me for bringing you to England?" "I, Mr. Fogg," replied Auda, checking the pulsations of her heart. "Please let me finish," returned Mr. Fogg. "When I decided to bring you far away from the country which was so unsafe for you, I was rich and counted on putting a portion of my fortune at your disposal," means spending money on you, "and then your existence would have been free and happy. But now I am ruined." "I know it, Mr. Fogg," replied Auda, "and I ask you in my turn, will you forgive me for having followed you, and who knows, for having perhaps delayed you and thus contributed to your ruin?" So on the way, when he left, he met Auda somewhere, and then he fell in love with her, and she also agreed to go with him. "Madam, you could not remain in India, and your safety could only be assured by bringing you to such a distance that your persecutors could not take you." So it is something where this female, this lady belongs to India. So if you read the whole novel, you'll come to know. And somewhere she needed safety, and so she went along with Fogg. Okay, so she was going to travel with him to London. "So, Mr. Fogg," resumed Auda, "not content with rescuing me from a terrible death, you thought yourself bound to secure my comfort in a foreign land. Means, are you not happy that you saved me from a terrible death? So you don't have to worry about my comfort in a foreign land." "Yes, ma'am, but circumstances have been against me. Still, I beg to place the little I have left at your service." "But what will become of you, Mr. Fogg?" "As for me, ma'am," replied the gentleman coldly, "I have need of nothing." Means, I don't need anything. "But how do you look upon the fate, sir, which awaits you?" "As I am in the habit of doing, at least," said Auda, "want should not overtake a man like you. Your friends—" "I have no friends, madam." "Your relatives—" "I have no longer any relatives." "I pity you then." Means, I am feeling sorry for you, Mr. Fogg, for solitude is a sad thing, with no heart to which to confide your griefs. Means, to tell somebody your problems. They say, though misery itself shared by two sympathetic souls may be borne with patience. So we need somebody to share our problems. "They say so, madam." "Mr. Fogg," said Auda, rising and seizing his hand, "do you wish at once a kinswoman and friend? Will you have me for your wife?" Mr. Fogg at this rose in his turn. There was an unwonted light in his eyes and a slight trembling of his lips. Auda looked into his face. The sincerity, rectitude, firmness and sweetness of the soft glance of a noble woman who could dare all to save him, to whom she owed all, at first astonished, then penetrated him. He shut his eyes for an instant, as if to avoid her look. When he opened them again, I love you, he said, simply. Yes, by all that is holiest, I love you and am entirely yours. Ah, cried Auda, pressing his hand to her heart. Passepartout was summoned and appeared immediately. Mr. Fogg still held Auda's hand in his own, and Passepartout understood, and his big round face became as radiant as the tropical sun at its zenith. Zenith is horizon. Mr. Fogg asked him if it was not too late to notify the Reverend Samuel Wilson of Marylebone Parish that evening. Means this person is a father in a church, who can get them married. So Mr. Fogg is saying, is it not too late? I mean, if it's not too late, is it okay that we go and call him now? Passepartout smiled his most genial smile and said, never too late. It was 5 minutes past 8. Will it be for tomorrow, Monday? For tomorrow, Monday, said Mr. Fogg, turning to Auda. Yes, for tomorrow, Monday, she replied. Okay, so according to them, it is Sunday. But actually it is not Sunday, it is Saturday. Means they can still win the bet. He doesn't know. Okay, I hope you are understanding this part. That when you cross that international date line, if it is Saturday on this side, it's going to be Saturday that side also. Means it doesn't become Sunday. Okay. So for actually it is Saturday, but they are thinking that it is Sunday evening. Passepartout hurried off as fast as his legs could carry him. Then comes chapter 36, in which Phileas Fogg's name is once more at a premium on change. It is time to relate what a change took place in English public opinion when it is transpired that the real bank robber, a certain James Strand, had been arrested on the 17th of December at Edinburgh. 3 days before, Phileas Fogg had been a criminal who was being desperately followed up by the police. Now he was an honorable gentleman. See the change suddenly. Just because his face looks like James Strand, they had arrested him. So 3 days back he was a criminal and today he is a very honorable gentleman, mathematically pursuing his eccentric journey around the world. The papers resumed their discussion about the wager. All those who had laid bets for and against him revived their interest as if by magic. The Phileas Fogg bonds again became negotiable and many new wagers were made. So people are all betting. Oh, if Fogg comes back, then you pay me this or I'll pay you this, So Phileas Fogg's name was once more at a premium on change. His 5 friends of the Reform Club passed these 3 days in a state of feverish suspense. Would Phileas Fogg, whom they had forgotten, reappear before their eyes? Where was he at this moment? The 17th of December, the day of James Strand's arrest, was the 76th since Phileas Fogg's departure, and no news of him had been received. Was he dead? Had he abandoned the effort, or was he continuing his journey along the route agreed upon? And would he appear on Saturday? Remember this date, the 21st of December at 9:15 in the evening. 9:15 means 8:45. Okay, and here see it is 5 minutes past 8. Remember, it's already 8:05 here when they are discussing about getting married the next day. They don't realize it. Okay, they think it is Sunday evening, actually it is Saturday evening. So there is still time, 40 minutes still to go. The anxiety in which for 3 days London society existed cannot be described. Telegrams were sent to America and Asia for news of Phileas Fogg. Messengers were dispatched to the house because they were wondering whether he's alive or dead. No news at all. In Savile Row, morning and evening. No news. The police were ignorant what had become of the detective Fix, who had so unfortunately followed up a false scent. It was wrong, but he had followed him. So police did not know that also. They were ignorant. Bets increased nevertheless in number and value. Phileas Fogg, like a racehorse, was drawing near his last turning point. The bonds were quoted no longer at 100 below par, but at 20, at 10, at 5, and paralytic old Lord Albemarle bet even, means all people are all betting, that if he comes back, then what? Or if he doesn't come back, then what? A great crowd was collected in Pall Mall and the neighbouring streets on Saturday evening. It seemed like a multitude of brokers permanently established around the reform. All the people had reached there to see if this man is going to come back. Circulation was impeded and everywhere disputes, discussions and financial transactions were going on. The police had great difficulty in keeping back the crowd, and as the hour when Phileas Fogg was due approached, the excitement rose to its highest pitch. The 5 antagonists of Phileas Fogg had met in the great saloon of the club. John Sullivan and Samuel Fallentin, bankers; Andrew Stuart, engineer; Gauthier Ralph was the director of the Bank of England; and Thomas Flanagan was the brewer. Brewer is the one who makes drinks and all. So one and all, everyone, they were all waiting. When the clock indicated 20 minutes past 8, so now it's 8:20. Andrew Stuart got up, saying, "Gentlemen, in 20 minutes the time agreed upon between Mr. Fogg and ourselves will have expired." "What time did the last train arrive from Liverpool?" asked Thomas Flanagan. "At 23 minutes past 7, replied Gauthier Ralph. "And the next does not arrive till 10 minutes after 12. "Well, gentlemen," resumed Andrew Stuart, "if Phileas Fogg had come in the 7:23 train, he would have got here by this time. We can therefore regard the bet as won." So they said they have won the bet because Phileas Fogg has not reached yet. "Wait, don't let us be too hasty," means don't hurry, replied Samuel Fallentin. "You know that Mr. Fogg is very eccentric, means उनका कभी भी कुछ भी कर सकते हैं, okay? His punctuality is well known. He never arrives too soon or too late. Means he is very punctual. He will come on the dot. And I should not be surprised if he appeared before us at the last minute." "Why," said Andrew Stuart nervously, "if I should see him, I should not believe it was he." Means it is very difficult to believe that it is him. "The fact is," resumed Thomas Flanagan, "Mr. Fogg's project was absurdly foolish. Whatever his punctuality, he could not prevent the delays which were certain to occur, and a delay of only 2 or 3 days would be fatal to his tour." Means even if 2 or 3 days he was delayed, then he wouldn't be able to reach on time. "Observe too," added John Sullivan, "that we have received no intelligence from him, though there are telegraphic lines all along his route." So they have not received any information. "He has lost, gentlemen," said Andrew Stuart. "He has 100 times lost. You know besides that the China, the only steamer he could have taken from New York to get here in time, arrived yesterday. So they are finding all the ways how to reach that place. There's a train which reaches at 7:23. Then there's a steamer which must have already come. I have seen a list of the passengers and the name of Phileas Fogg is not among them. Even if we admit that fortune has favored him, he can scarcely have reached America. I think he will be at least 20 days behindhand, and that Lord Albemarle will lose a cool 5,000. So this person who has also bet separately 5,000. "It is clear," replied Gauthier Ralph, "and we have nothing to do but to present Mr. Fogg's cheque at Barings tomorrow. At this moment, the hands of the club clock pointed to 20 minutes to 9. So 20 minutes to 9 becomes how much? It is 8:40. 5 minutes more, said Andrew Stuart. The five gentlemen looked at each other. Their anxiety was becoming intense. So if you see chapter wise, this is, what is happening at Mr. Fogg's place. And this chapter 36 is all about what is happening at the Reform Club. Okay, simultaneously. 5 minutes more, said Andrew Stuart. The five gentlemen looked at each other. Their anxiety was becoming intense, but not wishing to be betrayed, they readily assented to Mr. Falentine's proposal of a rubber. I wouldn't give up my 4,000 of the bet, said Andrew Stuart as he took his seat, for 3,999. The clock indicated 18 minutes to 9. So it's becoming closer and closer it's going. Okay, so here it has already become 8:42. The players took up their cards, but could not keep their eyes off the clock. Certainly, however secure they felt, minutes had never seemed so long to them. 17 minutes to 9. See how slowly they are building up the suspense, no? Said Thomas Flanagan as he cut the cards which Ralph handed to him. Then there was a moment of silence. The great saloon was perfectly quiet, but the murmurs of the crowd outside were heard with now and then a shrill cry. The pendulum beat the seconds, which each player eagerly counted as he listened with mathematical regularity. 16 minutes to 9, said John Sullivan in a voice which betrayed his emotion. 16 becomes 8:44. 1 minute more and the wager would be won. Andrew Stuart and his partner suspended their game. They left their cards and counted the seconds. So they had to reach at the 40th second, nothing. At the 50th, still nothing. At the 55th, a loud cry was heard in the street, followed by applause and some fierce growls. All the people were screaming outside. The players rose from their seats. Here I am, gentlemen. At the 57th second, the door of the saloon opened, and the pendulum had not waited the 60th second when Phileas Fogg appeared, followed by an excited crowd who had forced their way through the club doors, and in his calm voice said, Here I am, gentlemen. He reached 3 minutes before the time fixed. Now, how did he reach in time is the next part. Okay. In which it is shown that Phileas Fogg gained nothing by his tour, unless it was happiness. Yes. Okay, so here let's see what happens. The reader will remember that at 5 minutes past 8 in the evening, about 5:20 hours after the arrival of the travellers in London, Passepartout had been sent by his master to engage the services of a Reverend Samuel Wilson in a certain marriage ceremony. So if you go back and think in the earlier chapter, what happened was, it was actually for them, they thought it was like Sunday evening and they decided to get married. So Passepartout went out to fix the marriage. They went to check with the Reverend Samuel Wilson that next day they would get married. Okay, so they thought but actually it was not Sunday, it was Saturday. With his hair in disorder and without his hat he ran. Passepartout went on his errand enchanted. He soon reached the clergyman's house, but found him not at home. Passepartout waited good 20 minutes, and when he left the reverend gentleman, it was 35 minutes past 8. So it was already 8:35 when... But in what a state he was! With his hair in disorder and without his hat, he ran along the street as never man was seen to run before, overturning passers-by, rushing over the sidewalk like a waterspout. So Passepartout ran. In 3 minutes he was in. 8:38 he reached where Fogg was and staggered into Mr. Fogg's room. He could not speak. "What is the matter?" asked Mr. Fogg. "My master," gasped Passepartout. "Marriage, impossible." So Mr. Fogg is saying, impossible? Impossible for tomorrow. Why so? Because tomorrow is Sunday. Mr. Fogg said, "No, it's Monday." "No, today is Saturday." "Saturday, impossible." Yes, cried Passepartout. "You have made a mistake of one day. We arrived 24 hours ahead of time, but there are only 10 minutes left." Passepartout had seized his master by the collar and was dragging him along with irresistible, such a faithful, friend. Phileas Fogg, thus kidnapped without having time to think, left his house, jumped into a cab, promised £100 to the cabman, and having run over 2 dogs and overturned 5 carriages. Means see the speed with which they are going. They had to like accidents also, they overturned 5 carriages, they ran over 2 dogs. The clock indicated 9:15 when he appeared in the guest saloon. So when he reached there, it was 8:45. Phileas Fogg accomplished the journey round the clock in 80 days. Phileas Fogg had won his wage of £20,000. How was it that a man so exact and fastidious could have made this error of a day? How came he to think that he had arrived in London on Saturday, the 21st day of December, when it was really Friday, the 20th, the 79th day? The cause of the error is very simple. Phileas Fogg had, without suspecting it, gained 1 day on his journey, and this merely because he had travelled constantly eastward. He would, on the contrary, have lost a day had he gone in the opposite direction. So if you know the globe, so when you travel like this and you cross the date line, so here if it is Friday, when you cross over also it will, so that means like 24 hours you are still on the same day. Okay, this is what happens when you go to US and all. Like you start on the 24th year, and like supposing you're supposed to, according to the Indian this, you're supposed to reach on the 24th there. You'll be wondering that I left on 24th and I'm reaching also on 24th only. This happens. So you can check the net for this more details if you want. Okay. So in journeying eastward, he had gone towards the sun, and the days therefore diminished for him as many times 4 minutes as he crossed degrees in this direction. There are 360 degrees on the circumference of the earth, and these it's all about latitudes and longitudes here. And these 360 degrees multiplied by 4 minutes gives precisely 24 hours. That is the day unconsciously gained. In other words, while Phileas Fogg, going eastward, saw the sun pass the meridian 80 times, his friends in London only saw it pass the meridian 79 times. This is why they waited at the Reform Club on Saturday and not Sunday, as Mr. Fogg thought. And Passepartout's famous family watch, which had always kept London time, would have betrayed this fact if it had marked the days as well as hours and the minutes. Phileas Fogg then had won the £20,000, but as he had spent nearly 19,000 on the way, the gain was small. His object was, however, to be victorious and not to win money. He divided the £1,000 that remained between Passepartout and the unfortunate Fix, against whom he cherished no grudge. So he had only 1,000 left. Sorry. He deducted, however, from Passepartout's share the cost of the gas which had burned in his room for 1920 hours for the sake of regularity. That evening, Mr. Fogg, as tranquil and phlegmatic as ever, said to Auda, "Is our marriage still agreeable to you?" "Mr. Fogg," replied she, "it is for me to ask that question. You were ruined, but now you are rich again." "Pardon me, ma'am. My fortune belongs to you. If you had not suggested our marriage, my servant would not have gone to Reverend Samuel Wilson's. I should not have been apprised of my error." "And, dear Mr. Fogg," said the young woman. "Dear Auda," replied Phileas Fogg, "it need not be said that the marriage took place 48 hours after, and that Passepartout, glowing and dazzling, gave the bride away. Had he not saved her, and was he not entitled to this honor? The next day, as soon as it was light, Passepartout rapped vigorously at his master's door. Mr. Fogg opened it and asked, "What's the matter, Passepartout?" "What is it, sir? Why, I have just this instant found out